Today we continue looking at not just the structure, but what the church is trying to address. What are those important areas that the church is very much concerned about, and because of that, there are structures in place to carry them out. So, for example, the last time we met, we talked about the Secretariat of State. We talked about the congregation for doctrine of the faith, the teaching of the Catholic Church. And we also talked about the Eastern churches and how they are get special attention, partly because of their size, partly because of where they are in that very dangerous part of the world today, as we see happening in Northern Africa and in the Middle East, and then over in the area of Iraq and Iran and Pakistan and Afghanistan. So all of that gives an idea of what the church sees as really crucial that the church has to be attentive to. Today I'd like to continue. Certainly, as we know, Jesus spent a lot of time, in fact 3 years, sort of preparing those who would be his closest advisors to take a leadership role in the church, and we call them the apostles. Now, who are the apostles today? What name would we put with the apostles today? What group? Clergy. What else? Maybe a term that would be a smaller group than the clergy. Yes. The bishops. The bishops are called the successors of the apostles. And so there's a very special congregation called the Congregation of Bishops, and their task is choosing who they will recommend to the Pope. Let me just briefly outline what happens. We'll use the example of Chicago. Very recently, the Holy See made an announcement that the Cardinal Archbishop there is over 75, submitted his letter of resignation, and was waiting. The waiting was during a time where he had another bout with cancer, and he was getting on close to 80 at that time, and Rome then decided that it was really time to move to bring a new person into that role of Archbishop of Chicago. Chicago is a very large diocese. It's the second biggest in the United States. Over 3 million Catholics. So, not everyone would be qualified, have the background and all, to take on such an enormous position. And so the person who represents the Pope in the United States, a man by the name of Archbishop Vigano, who is in Washington, D.C., he consults with some of the cardinals and the archbishops about who they would suggest. And then you have a process where it would already be a bishop, but there would be issues about, is the man up to a big job? Is he someone who gets along? Certainly in a place like Chicago, there are many, many different ethnic groups. One would have to have that freedom of interacting with, on the one hand, Italians and then Slovenians and so on and so forth. They have Mass in well over 30 languages every Sunday in Chicago. And so after the process, the cardinal in charge of the Congregation of Bishops goes to the Pope and says, this is our recommendation. Here are 3 bishops and we recommend them. Now, we'll never know which one was first on the list, which was second, which was third, but the Pope chose one of those three, and it was the Archbishop of Seattle, Washington. And so he will be going to Chicago to take over that, that responsibility. So that group, the group on the Congregation of Bishops, they are the ones that, when a bishop needs an auxiliary bishop, that goes through that group also. Now, if you're picking the leaders, I started out as an auxiliary bishop, and I was an auxiliary from 2001 to 2006, and then I got the call one day that the Holy Father wanted me to leave Boston and come to Cleveland, where I would be the bishop of this diocese. And, so this is the work of that congregation, which is very, very significant because they are looking for the persons who can best serve in this particular place. I mean, some dioceses are very small. You take, for example, Steubenville, which is on the east side of Ohio. It's a very long diocese, but not too wide. There are 40,000 Catholics. And we have more than 40,000 Catholics in the city of Parma. So there are small dioceses, and there are big ones like Chicago, Los Angeles. Another very important group that the church, is always looking out for is those areas in the world where the Catholic Church is still small, growing, needs help. And, that was what the United States was. When the Europeans came to the United States, they were supported by the church from Europe. They were supported by finances, the propagation of the faith in Germany and France, but they were also supported by the countries from which the people came with priests and religious women. And we know that group as the propagation of the faith. Their job was to provide the help that was needed in those parts of the world where the church was still in its infancy. It takes time for a church to become more mature. More mature in the sense, first of all, you've been living the faith for a longer period of time, number one. But number two, you're able now to provide for yourselves. In other words, you've got vocations going into the seminary, you've got vocations going into religious orders, you've got people who are committed to the different works of the church. Now the church in a country can provide for itself. And in fact, not only provide for itself, but it then takes on the responsibility of helping those places that are still growing. So, for example, in 1908, the church said that the United States was no longer a mission country. From the time of the first missionaries that came here until 1908, the Catholic Church in the United States was overseen by the propagation of the faith. Now the name is different. It's called Evangelization of the Peoples. Exact same group. Well, no, some of them have died, but it's the same organization doing the same things, helping in those areas where there's a shortage of priests and nuns and resources. In 1911, 3 years later, they were said, you're no longer a new part of the church, you are a mature part. the American Foreign Mission Society was formed. You may not recognize that name, but that's the name for Maryknoll. Maryknoll was the first organized attempt in the United States to respond to areas that did not have a strong presence of the church. And so there were vocations to Maryknoll, and they were men who became priests. Women, some became nuns, and they were in cloisters praying for the work, and then also women who became sisters. The words sister and nun, we tend to use them as if they were interchangeable, but they really aren't. A nun is cloistered. Over on Euclid Avenue, the Poor Clares at Euclid and 40th, they are cloistered. Their life is a life of prayer. Also out on Rocky River Drive, another group of cloistered nuns whose life is praying for the work of the church. And on Fairmont Avenue, the Carmelites. So we have three groups of cloistered nuns. Sisters are women who have dedicated their lives to God also, but in a different way, by doing things outside of the building. Running schools, running hospitals, doing social outreach. All of those kind of works that we see sisters do, that becomes part of it. Well, in 1911 they founded Maryknoll, and lo and behold, where do they go? China! That's what Rome said. China is where you're needed. And they were there until communism, and then the communists kicked them out. But they have been there for many years doing this evangelization to people. So this is a very significant part of the church from the very beginning to today. We have religious orders and dioceses. Look at, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of our diocese having priests, religious women, and lay women for the past 50 years in El Salvador. And that's part of the evangelization. The Pope said Central America and South America need help from Europe and North America. And Cleveland stepped up to the plate. Boston stepped up to the plate. St. Louis stepped up to the plate. And they have had a presence in that part of the world for 50 years. And that is the work of the church, in faithfulness to our Lord. The last words he said was, "Go therefore and teach all nations." And the church is still committed to that. To the nations. Ad gentes is the Latin. And that's what these people, men and women, who are Catholic, dedicate their lives to what the Lord asked, to bring the good news of Christ to the whole world. And that's still going on faithfully and energetically. I mean, right now we have 3 priests who are in South America. In El Salvador, in Central America. But there are 3 of our, Cleveland priests who are there right now. Okay? There is also a group, an office, if you will, called the Congregation for Clergy. That would be deacons and priests. And they oversee vocation work. They oversee seminaries and the programs for deacons. They're the ones who also offer various programs themselves for ongoing formation. One of the things the church has come to really appreciate increasingly is that, when you get ordained, something very special has happened. However, it's not over. You still have to continue formation. I'm just going to I'm going to ask the police officer who is here. Officer, when you are, an officer, as you go from one year to another, are there programs that they offer you? Right. Right. A lot of people, teachers have in-service things. Accountants have it. Lawyers have it. Priests have it. And the deacons have it. And that all comes out of this particular congregation of the clergy. And some of the things they offer in Rome and invite them to come. Other things they provide for the diocese as to what we should be offering them. And it really comes down to 4 areas. Things that will help our human formation. The human being that we are. We can always be better. Spiritually, we can always be closer to God. We also have to learn what new is coming. So that, we have classes for priests and deacons after they've been ordained. And lastly, pastoral skills like in counseling or in how better to prepare homilies and deliver them. You might be able to write a brilliant homily, but you're not able to deliver it. And now the first full week in October, the priests of the diocese and I are going out to Sawmill Creek for 2.5 days, and 2 priests from the country are coming to give us more insights into preparing homilies and delivering them. It's the most important way we interact with the faithful on Sunday and holy days. And so we have we'll be sending everyone out to Sawmill Creek, and we will be hearing presentations, examples of preaching to help us, do this better. So that the church doesn't just lay hands on people, ordain them, and say, well, off you go. No, we'll be seeing you regularly. You'll be coming back to us because we have something else to share with you. And there's this very important office in Rome that takes care of that. They're the ones that prepare and suggestions as to how best to do it so that the people can benefit across the world. We also have a very special group, and they deal with religious. Who are religious? Well, they're men and women who have chose a very special way of living, and we have come to know it as religious orders. In our diocese, we have a lot of religious orders. We have the Jesuit fathers, the Benedictine monks, the Capuchin friars, the Franciscans, the St. Joseph fathers, the Blessed Sacrament fathers. They're all different religious orders. And then there's all the women. The Notre Dame sisters, the Ursulines, the Humility of Mary, the St. Joseph sisters, the Sisters of Charity of St. Augustine, the Trinitarian sisters, and all of them come from different religious orders that have been founded over the past 15, 16 centuries. And each one of them had a founder. And every one of the founders came with an idea called a charism, a gift. What do you think the gift was for the Jesuits? To teach, right, to teach. That was their gift. What do you think was the gift for the Franciscans? To help the poor. I mean, when Francis founded the Franciscans, the big task was, remember now, I mean, this gets tied up in European history because in the 1200s, I mean, we might laugh at it today, but there was an industrialization going on, attracting people from the farms into the cities. Well, when you bring a lot of people into the cities, you have some challenges, sicknesses, illnesses, people die young, children are orphans, and the Franciscans were there to take care of those who were poor and were suffering through those things. The same thing with women. Women were founded, for example, Elizabeth Ann Seton founded here in the United States a religious order that was for teaching, Catholic schools. The Ursulines from France, they were the first religious order that came to the United States in 1711 in New Orleans. And it was to teach young women. That was their gift, their charism. So every one of these religious orders was founded for a purpose. And that purpose has been integrated into the church. And there are some things that are common to the religious orders. For example, most of them take 3 vows: chastity, poverty, and obedience. Now, there are some men's orders that take a 4th vow. The Jesuits take a 4th vow of obedience to the Pope. The Benedictines take a 4th vow of stability. When you become a Benedictine, you become a Benedictine for that monastery. And the ideal is that you will live your life in that monastery. Franciscans do not stay in one place. They move. They're what they call, the mendicant orders. And they move, where the people go. But the Benedictines would be stable. Well, anyway, there's a group in Rome, and the Holy Father has asked them to prepare a special year beginning on the 21st of November and will end the 21st of November next year, that we focus on religious life. We have scheduled that Friday night, the 21st of November, a Mass here, and we've invited all the religious in the diocese to come. Now, everyone won't come, but a large number will come. And also people who are, say they went to their schools or their hospitals. They will want to come to say thank you to God. And we're going to try to help people rekindle an appreciation for what religious life has meant in our lives. I know, for example, I went to a Catholic grammar school for 8 years. I went to a Catholic high school for 4 years. And it wasn't until I was a senior in high school that I had a lay person teach me. For 11 and almost 12 full years, I had nuns, for which I'm grateful. Any good that I am is largely to them, and those things that are not so good in me, I didn't pay attention to them. But anyway, they have made a big impact in our Catholic life here in the United States. They really have. So anyway, the whole world has been invited to work on raising people's awareness and appreciation of what religious life is all about.